Naruto exclusive videos lemon come out on my Boosty. There is a 50% discount on subscription levels. You can watch and subscribe. Link in the description. Enjoy watching. Description: it is clear to everyone that Naruto cannot live without adventures. But life after the war turned out in such a way that the famous blonde had to gather dust, gnawing on the granite of science, trampling her way to her dream. Boredom. True, it turned out that adventures also cannot live without Naruto. Take this, sign for it. The quest called Fall on Tobirama's Head begins. And in this set with Tobirama there are also Hashirama and Madara. Now it will definitely not be boring. Chapter 27. Tobirama had no time for her all this time. He, his brother and Mito were entertaining guests. And that strange woman she saw in Tobirama's office was doing the same. As it turned out, she was the cousin of the Senju brothers. With Uzumaki, Naruto talked a little. And even then, most of the delegation looked at her with a wolfish expression. The fair-haired half-breed aroused some disdain in them, reminding them of the Uchiha. Her main interlocutor was Akane. But she quickly switched to talking to the Hyuga, whom Naruto did not meet here, in addition to the Byakugan users. Sarutobi Yamanaka, whose clan leader, greeted her and asked a couple of polite questions, Nara, Akimichi, Aburame, Inuzuka. The overwhelming majority, of course, were Uchiha and Senju. And they behaved quite decently, friendly. They even talked to each other, exaggeratedly pretending that the hatchet of war was buried. Naruto saw that they were uneasy. They did not particularly try to hide their sidelong glances, full of suspicion. In this crowd, Naruto felt lonely and lost. Not of this world. It seemed like here she was, a kunoichi Konoha, and even a recognized Uzumaki, because her kimono had the sign of the whirlpool embroidered on it, which had not yet entered into circulation here, and everyone avoided her. So she decided to join another outcast. Everyone avoided Madara too. The stream of guests cautiously flowed around his location, going around in an arc. Even his own clanmates avoided him. So Naruto decided that he vitally needed her company. True, Naruto was not entirely sure that it was she who decided so. Perhaps the alcohol controlled her. She had already drunk enough to get drunk. Don't be sad. Naruto was next to Madara. The Uchiha lazily looked up at her, pressing his lips into a thin line. He hastened to show with his gaze everything he thought about her and her statement in particular. In Madara's amethyst eyes, the black and hungry tongues of Amaterasu danced. Naruto did not even bat an eyelid. Hashirama's wedding is inopportune, she said, taking a swig from the bottle. Straight from the bottle. Madara was a little taken aback, forgetting to show his disgust at her lack of manners. If you looked really closely, you could see his right eyebrow crawl up a couple of millimeters in a stingy gesture of surprise. Your world has collapsed, and he there is fussing over his wife like a chicken with an egg, and nothing else exists for him anymore. She put her elbow on the table, rested her chin on her open palm, and looked at the protracted party with universal sadness. Envy is a bad feeling, Madara reasoned philosophically. I'm not jealous. Naruto snorted, offended. Well, maybe just a little, she admitted, sighing convulsively and washing away her sorrows by taking another swig from the sake bottle. Today she could afford to get drunk. Chakra Kurama was not currently affecting her body, so she was drinking unusually quickly. But we are not talking about me now. We are talking about you. It seems to me that you need a friend now. She turned sharply in his direction, slightly swaying. Her vision began to swim. It seems to me that you are interfering in something that is none of your business. His voice acquired a threatening intonation. The dangerous black sparks of their clan's deadly technique danced in his eyes again. Naruto sees and knows too much, and it makes him angry. Don't tell me where I should go and where I shouldn't. Hick, Naruto got angry, quite tipsy. And she even slammed her fist on the table for importance. Madara needs to be softened, because he is angry and sullen. And it makes her angry. Her fists itched suspiciously, and she wanted to scratch them on his arrogant aristocratic face. She glanced around the table and saw that the drinks were unopened and Madara seemed very sober. Surely Uchiha would not be happy if she poured him some from her bottle and would stab her for insulting his arrogance with slobbered's sake. So, taking the bottle from his table, she drank a hearty amount of rice wine into a bowl, generously splashing the tabletop as well. "Drink," she ordered, not very impressively, but stubbornly pushed the alcohol towards him, predictably spilling some of it. Madara only pursed his lips in disgust and turned away. And so he was blessed with happiness in the form of Naruto. He was sitting, not bothering anyone, keeping an eye on things from afar, and then here she was trying to get into his soul without soap. Naruto clicked his tongue in displeasure, but did not insist. It would be more expensive for himself. And thank the gods, she fell silent, drinking sake and looking at the crowd. The silence did not last long. "Madara, do you believe in Biju?" she suddenly said, turning her head in his direction. And she glared at him with a look that looked straight into his soul. Uchiha finally showed her due attention and looked so piercingly that Naruto noticeably pouted. "No," he spat coldly and turned away. "Why did my question infuriate you so?" Naruto tried to draw Madara out of his depth, not very carefully. If Kurama were in touch, he would say that Naruto was not drawing Madara out of his depth, but out of himself. Madara was silent, very convincingly pretending to be a stone statue. Naruto, frowning, cursed dirty under her breath and finished the bottle in 3 large gulps, so as not to blurt out that Uchiha was brazenly lying and believing in Biju. Sure enough, he was probably already gathering information on where to find a representative of the tailed beasts. Here, a peeled tangerine was thrust under her nose. Naruto, drunkenly hiccuping, accepted the treat from the hands of Hashirama, who sat down next to them, and immediately began to put a couple of juicy and aromatic slices into her mouth. "Apf. Where is Mito?" Naruto asked with his mouth full, not noticing his equally happy bride next to the happy groom. "Mito is tired, she went to rest." Hashirama instantly reached for the uncorked bottle and poured himself some wine into a bowl, immediately draining it to the very bottom, wincing contentedly. "What about the wedding night?" Naruto asked, swallowing a tangerine. "Hashirama, if you get drunk, I'm afraid you won't be able to live up to your wife's expectations." Madara was taken aback again. Hashirama choked on a piece of sashimi. And both of them looked at her with puzzled eyes. The conclusion suggested itself that Naruto and tact were incompatible. Saying such things in the company of men. No shame, no conscience. "What?" "Give it to me here." With an unperturbed look, she tried to snatch the bottle from Hashirama's hands. He did not loosen his grip on the neck, not allowing Naruto to take the sake. And if she applied more force, they would break it again. It would be a pity. Stunned by this fact, she froze and looked demandingly at Hashirama. She needed the sake more. Her melancholy and sadness were eating her up from the inside. And alcohol was a great way to drown out this mournful, scraping feeling, intensified by the fact that no one needed her here. Uzumaki frowned and pulled it towards herself with force. The elder Senju pulled towards himself, not intending to give in. She did not have enough strength. Hashirama was stronger, first of all, because he was clearly sober, and secondly, because he was the god of shinobi. But Naruto would not be Naruto if this made her retreat. Demons danced in the cloudy blue eyes, the lips spread into a sly smile. Madara, who had been pretending not to watch this circus all this time, straightened up. "I hope you're not as wooden in bed as your techniques. And that's not the reason you're not with Mito yet." The wit that flew out of her mouth reached its target, striking her on the spot. Hashirama blinked his eyes wide open, muttered something muffled and hung there. A blush appeared on his cheeks. Madara shook his head slightly. A smile seemed to blossom on the lips of this formidable representative of the red-eyed clan. True, it was a little twisted and crooked, because Uchiha are not supposed to smile. Therefore, one could assume that Madara's facial nerve was pinched, and not that his lips were spreading in an uninvited smile. Naruto, without thinking for a second, snatched the bottle from the weakened hands of Hashirama, who was flushed like a poppy flower, jumped up from her seat as quickly as her reaction, seasoned with a good portion of alcohol, allowed her, and ran away until the embarrassed Hashirama caught up with her, not only to take the wine away, but also to scold her for her cruel joke. It was not difficult to get lost in the thinned-out crowd. But there was no pursuit. For now, Naruto relaxed when she reached the opposite edge of the clearing, where the celebration was located. Hashirama and Madara were no longer visible. But now she saw Tobirama. He, as befits a slightly antisocial genius, was sitting to the side catching his breath. On his shoulders that day fell no less worries than Hashirama. The younger Senju was deservedly resting. Naruto decided not to intrude on his melancholic solitude. She had already annoyed him enough with her presence. Since the mission to capture Kakuzu, they had seen each other too often. And Tobirama was not thrilled with her company, as practice had shown. And it was mutual. Probably. Not exactly. Because she was delighted with Tobirama, although he was sometimes annoying. But the title of second Hokage was not given to just anyone. So, one could safely admire him. A genius who would discover many techniques, come up with an impressive number of reforms, and die a hero. In a fight with Ginkaku and Kinkaku, distracting them so that the old man third, Danzo, and that annoying kid Kagami could be saved. Warmth mixed with sadness spread through Naruto's chest, his cloudy gaze expressed undisguised adoration. Such a great man Tobirama. An example to follow. And this will of fire of his. Senju now looked little like the person Naruto imagined him to be. Hunched over the table, he was already drinking his third cup of wine. In one gulp. Staring blankly into space. And he looked very depressed and tired of life. He definitely could use his brother's company. But the elder Senju was now sitting and drinking with Madara, who also needed the company of his brother Tobirama. Or Hashirama had already run off to Mito to prove to her that he was not made of wood. Naruto's jab had clearly hurt him. By the way, about family. She could not imagine that Hashirama was not the only one with a passion for alcohol. At the close ceremony, he also drank sake like water. Apparently, it was definitely a family thing. Naruto had already counted the 5th cup. No. This won't do. Or he'll become an alcoholic, and he needs to take care of his brain. Alcohol has a destructive effect on the gray matter. And Tobirama's mind is priceless. The legacy of an entire nation urgently needs to be saved. So Naruto decided to stop watching, because Tobirama looked very, very lonely and unhappy, just like herself, sitting in the farthest corner, as if hiding from something. Uzumaki couldn't leave Tobirama suffering from loneliness and trouble. She had gotten too used to his company. And it was becoming akin to a necessity. To be near someone, so as not to go crazy herself. And Tobirama kept her on her toes, without even realizing it, not letting her fall apart. Just as she couldn't afford to miss the chance to accuse the younger Senju of alcoholism. She really liked to tease him. With an unsteady but purposeful gait, she moved towards the younger Senju. But Naruto was ahead. About 10 meters from Tobirama, a bright red flash ran across her path, almost trampling her feet, like a horse-like Biju. There you are, Tobirama-sama, and I lost you. The aforementioned one grimaced in embarrassment, finished his 6th cup, and with the look of a trapped animal looked at the approaching scarlet-haired girl, putting on a mask of complete alienation. But Naruto saw all the doom that he felt when looking at the stranger. And she understood perfectly well that banal politeness fettered him hand and foot, and he could not send an annoying misunderstanding in the face of some Uzumaki. But Naruto could. She is not from here. She does not know customs and orders. And also she is Uzumaki. Half. So, taking a deep breath and putting on a smile, Naruto, full of faith in her absurd idea, went to save Tobirama. Tobirama clenched his jaw tensely, keeping his mouth shut. Being openly rude to a representative of the Uzumaki clan was not appropriate. And he really wanted to. He was even nervous now. Akira Uzumaki, who had been following him like a little tail throughout the entire celebration, found him again. Her intentions were clear and understandable right away. Mito's distant relative wanted to get the less famous Senju as a groom, because the most popular one had been snatched by the princess of the clan. And since Tobirama was no less a valuable representative of his kind, he had to be taken here and now. There were many competitors. The potential groom did not share her desires, and he hid from her as best he could, because he had never met a more annoying and clingy Uzumaki. And no psychological tricks, such as ki suppressing her aura and an open unwillingness to talk to her, could discourage her. The girl stubbornly did not want to understand that she was not welcome. Of course, it reminded her of someone. Partly. But Naruto was, "Darling, I lost you." Hot breath brushed his cheek along with someone else's lips, not letting him finish his thought. Weightless, barely touching, like butterfly wings. But it touched him so much that he immediately straightened up, as if he had swallowed a stick. Naruto unexpectedly, she appeared next to him, so close that even a sheet of paper would not have been possible to push between them if he had wanted to. His head began to buzz because of this. She had brought a hard one. That same other Uzumaki, the fair-haired Splinter, had dug in even deeper, hanging on his neck, wrapping her greedy little arms around him so tightly and passionately that Tobirama was afraid to blink, let alone breathe. Because he was crumbling under the weight of the emotional storm that flared up with her appearance. The scarlet-haired one Uzumaki's eyebrows crawled up under the pressure of surprise. She stared at them, as if she saw something that contradicted reality. And she categorically did not like it. "Darling, you must be tired, you've been on your feet all day." Naruto purred somewhere into his neck. Exaggeratedly loudly and very demonstratively. At the same time, she continued to press her body into him. "Let's go home, I'll give you a massage." So tenderly and naturally that Tobirama almost believed in the reality of what was happening. As if they were really going to get up now, hold hands and go home. Together. Because this was the absolute truth. "Naruto!" Tobirama muttered, dying away, having coped with the first storm wave and calmed his confusion. Naruto smelled strongly of alcohol. This is what brought him out of shock. The presence of the blonde was starting to irritate him. "My sweet, who is this?" And then Naruto turned her head to her potential relative, and glared menacingly. Her ki burst out like a hurricane, catching even the tips of her hair, showing that she was negatively disposed towards the stranger. Jealous. "Who are you?" His pursuer narrowed her eyes suspiciously, ignoring the gust of ki from her rival. Her gray eyes flashed lightning. The girl seemed to sense a catch. Or maybe the sheepish stubbornness embedded in the clan's genetic code made her stay where she was, not giving in to the unexpected obstacle to Tobirama's hand and heart. The air between the girls crackled. Tobirama felt like a piece of meat that two lionesses were trying to divide between themselves. All they could do was growl and release their claws, scratching each other's eyes. "Can't you see?" Uzumaki pressed herself closer. So tightly that she almost knocked them both over with her pressure to press herself into Tobirama. "Then open your eyes." Uzumaki spat roughly and pressed her lips to his neck, next to his ear. Again, almost knocking them over with her impulse. Tobirama cursed everything at that moment. All this world. And the chance that brought him here and now with these two. And the fate that mocked him and sent heavenly punishment in the person of Naruto. Uzumaki. And himself at the same time. If before everything could be blamed on sympathy, a feeling of gratitude for care and emerging respect, now everything became crystal clear. He needed proof of his theory? Take it, sign here. The rhythm of his heartbeat was out of rhythm. He broke out in a sweat from excitement. His mouth was dry. Goosebumps ran across his skin from each of her blasphemous manipulations. Even his own mind was treacherously trying to capitulate. Her closeness almost turned him inside out. In addition, he was torn apart by contradictions. His inside screamed, whined and begged to give in to such a tempting temptation. And he reached out to her light and warmth for another portion of pleasant sensations and care, which Naruto did not skimp on. While the remnants of his former composure were trying with all there might not to give in to these unnecessary impulses. "Play along with me," she whispered to him barely audibly, taking advantage of the moment. It seemed that just a little more, and Naruto would climb on him like a real monkey. Tobirama crossed his arms over his chest, pursing his lips. He could not express his dissatisfaction with what was happening in words. And he was not going to play along with this stupid Naruto. But his inner voice mercilessly caught him in a lie. He really wanted to play along with Naruto, taking advantage of the opportunity to get as much attention as possible. Being almost in his right mind, to be deceived. No way! Tobirama is not stupid to become, indulging his inappropriate desires, caused only by her special attitude towards him and his raging hormones, which give birth to all this disorder. You're drunk, stop it, he coldly cut Naruto off. Akira's gray eyes, on the contrary, sparkled triumphantly. With his sharp answer, he gave hope to the annoying girl. You are so, Naruto growled, getting angry, slightly pulled herself up and bit part of his ear. Shameless. Probably in revenge for the fact that he does not support her absurd idea aimed at getting rid of the annoying rival. Better the annoying Akira with her almost harmless attention than drunk Naruto, going too far. Naruto! Senju Tobirama lost his composure. He was literally shaking. He was angry and very shocked by the emotions that had washed over him when she bit him. Unclasping his hands, and grabbing Naruto, who was hanging on him, he tore her away with force, holding her at arm's length. He tried to suppress the desire to shake her, digging his fingers into her shoulders until they hurt. But he really wanted to. I'm trying for you, and you're so insensitive, she sobbed. Not feigned. Very natural. Her eyes grew moist. Akira celebrated her victory. Tobirama brushed off his rival. The armor he had tried so hard to keep around his heart trembled. Tobirama tiredly closed his eyes, took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. There was a good chance he would regret what he had done. You know very well what I'm like, don't be offended. He also softened very naturally. Frighteningly naturally. Naturally and effortlessly. As well as later pulling her towards him, embracing her. Naruto exhaled in surprise. Leaning over and kissing her on the top of her head soothingly, while gently stroking her back, happened somehow by itself. On pure inspiration. Their fictional story acquired bright colors, beginning to come to life. Akira was embarrassed by the annoyance that had overcome her. Throwing an angry and disappointing look at them, she gracefully stood up, proudly raised her chin and left, clearly complaining that she had wasted her time trying to get the attention of the, it turns out, busy Senju. But Tobirama didn't particularly pay attention to the annoying scarlet-haired girl. Uzumaki. He threw all his strength into not getting soft, and carried away by the performance. I wish I had done it right away, but you're drunk, and those evil Narutos of yours. Naruto muttered to him in her kimono, not paying attention to how tightly Tobirama was holding her close, and that he had been breathing deeply and measuredly with his nose buried in her hair for half a minute now. Yes, I'm drunk, I don't argue, but at least you won't get a headache from this lady. I saw that you weren't able to get rid of her. No, I understand, you're a prominent groom here and all that, but your character. You're terrible at times. Naruto continued to mutter, not having anything against the prolonged embrace. It was quite comfortable and warm in them. Yes, I'm terrible, I don't argue. Tobirama felt like he'd been doused with cold water. And they stuck a knife in his heart at the same time. It wasn't that he was ready to dive headfirst into what was happening, he wasn't the kind of person who was led by emotions, but her words had hurt him. Kami-sama, he was offended at her for thinking he was terrible. If someone else had told him that, he would have ignored it. Yes, that was who he was. But it sounded offensive coming from her mouth. And it also suggested that she didn't see him as... Who? A fiancé? A man? A lover? A partner? Senju chuckled at his thoughts. We've come to this. I admire your intelligence, strength, courage, devotion to your family, but you're so... Shut up! Tobirama hissed. He was shaken up again. Admiring him? A balm for his pride. And hope for his revived heart. Finding the strength within himself, he lowered his hands and turned away from her, reaching for the bottle. You can't do without a bottle. No, no, and no. Tobirama won't dig around in all this psycho-emotional swamp of relationships between a man and a woman. These are just chemical reactions of the brain, sending certain signals to the body. That's why he feels all this. Now he's covered with dopamine, that's why he has a desire for her company. Serotonin, because it brings joy to see how she cares for him, admires him. And he's shaking from adrenaline, and his heart is thundering louder than drums, and his mouth is dry. All that's left is to survive the surge of testosterone, responsible for lemon attraction, and God forbid oxytocin. The only thing he lacked was tender affection. Now he can still control himself, and this requires minimal effort for now. But if all these reactions will pile on in bulk, Tobirama drank and winced. The alcohol only fueled all the warmth he had managed to fill within Naruto's presence. He was strong, he could handle it. And smart. He wouldn't fall for all this romantic stuff. He would win this battle and wouldn't let himself get lost in his emotions for the girl he had despised and wanted to kill just yesterday. Especially since he still had doubts about her. His mind was stronger than his heart. Chapter 28. As it turned out, drinking with his brother had not hardened him. The well-known saying, "You can't drink away your skill," turned out to be a blatant lie. He had drunk away his shinobi skill. And Uzumaki, pressing her chest into his back, was not adding any bonuses. He stumbled every now and then, dragging her drunken carcass on his back. Naruto was either a real drunk and all her bolts had been blown off, or, damn that Uzumaki! What kind of Bija had he felt sorry for her and decided to help drag her drunken body home? And being no less drunk? No. It would have been better not to remember. Gritting his teeth, snorting laboriously, he grabbed her tighter under the knees and courageously trudged on, swaying as he went. As a true and noble man, he was obliged to help a lady in distress with all his dignity and honor, and not cowardly abandon this idea, because he himself was no better than this Uzumaki. And if you think logically, the chances of not reaching point B are higher than getting there. There was more than enough nobility, but only zero strength. And the trick with chakra that Hashirama taught him did not help sober up. There was several times more alcohol in his blood than blood itself. Silently drinking with Naruto by his side turned out to be a deliberately bad idea. It seemed that they both drank sake like water only for reasons known to them, clearly trying to drown out the internal storm. He was stormy. His legs were tangled, and drunk and sleepy Naruto kept sliding off his back, loosening the grip of her hands on his neck. And the heavy silk kimono was pulling him back, and Tobirama had a premonition that the moment was near when he would lose his balance, and they would fall on their backs. His reaction was clearly below zero now. So there was every chance of crushing Naruto with his drunken bulk, because the fair-haired Uzumaki was very miniature in comparison to him. He could not even imagine that he would be glad to see the wooden arch with the Uchiha's signature monogram on the facade, standing out brightly in the rays of the rising sun. "I won't go there," suddenly sounded over his ear. Naruto was almost whining. "I will never appear there again. Please note, you are not the one going." Tobirama frowned, standing near the gate to the Uchiha clan quarter. "And how can you mean that she won't go? He is dragging her through the entire village on nicknames. Standing on his own 2 feet is clearly no better than Naruto herself. True, she did not ask for this. It was purely his initiative. She looked so pitiful and lonely, falling asleep sitting at a low table. This picture touched a raw nerve, and Senju, without thinking, heaved her onto his hump and dragged her to where she would definitely be comfortable sleeping. She could have thanked him instead of being indignant. Don't cling to the Foralairo ug, forma. Triple Formuliravka. Here. Naruto couldn't handle long and complex words. If the beginning of a word was accessible, then it seemed to try to slip away, offended by the fact that a drunkard was trying to pronounce it. "And where are you going?" Senju frowned, swaying to the rhythm of the whirlwinds dancing before his eyes. They also made him feel sick. It seemed like he had never gotten so drunk. It took a couple of bottles to drown out his inappropriate desires. And now, buried under a good portion of sake, they threatened to rise like a phoenix from the ashes, and burn to ashes both mind and soul. Again, Naruto's proximity did not add bonuses, only worsened his situation. Maybe Naruto was his heavenly punishment, sent down on his head as a punishment for his terrible character? Wherever you take me, there I will go, Uzumaki said with a slurred tongue. Tobirama thought, and took a step forward. Since the choice was his, he chose the Uchiha quarter, because it was the closest. His cottony legs and lost balance could not guarantee safe movement. I will not go. Naruto resisted and grabbed him like a pincer. And if you take me, I will not get off you. She threatened not very impressively. You said it yourself, the choice is mine, Senju said as firmly as possible and crossed the threshold of the quarter, for which he immediately got it. Naruto, for lack of an alternative, bit him on the neck, painfully and hard. Tobirama jerked sharply, stumbled and was very close to getting to know the ground under his feet nose to nose. What kind of? Tobirama removed his hands from under her knees, fed up with his own nobility. It was better to continue to be indifferent. Let her fall off his back and land on her butt, and hurt as much as possible. But Uzumaki was not that drunk. Some kind of reaction remained. She managed to wrap her arms and legs around him, resisting the pull of gravity. Look at yourself, insensitive. And paranoid too, Naruto grumbled, fidgeting on his back. Crossing her legs at the ankles on his torso and hugging his neck tighter, she was not going to get off Tobirama's back until the bitter end. She was very happy with this method of transportation. She didn't trust her legs to walk. Put her down and she would immediately fall over. Naive! Tobirama snapped, raising his eyes to the sky, silently asking the gods why he was having to deal with all this. It became clear and understandable that he had lost this battle. Sighing heavily, he grabbed her under the knees again and dragged her deeper into the block, to where she now lived. I told you I wouldn't go there! I don't W.E. Naruto was being nasty and capricious right under his ear. Senju's head began to buzz even more from this. Not a woman, but a punishment. Why? Tobirama was perplexed, his ears throbbing unpleasantly from her voice. Although, to be frankly honest and taking into account the circumstances that had come to light at the wedding, he wasn't particularly eager to drag her here either. But he wasn't going to indulge his desires either. And yet some part of him really wanted to take her to himself. Because I'm Madara's wife, and I'm pregnant, too, and so brazen that I wag my tails at you. She briefly outlined the essence of the rumors circulating around her modest person. And you wag your tails at me? Tobirama, being a genius after all, understood that Naruto's presence next to him could be interpreted in any number of ways. And if we discard the motives and logic of her actions, then yes. Simple concern could be mistaken for interest of a different kind. And what she revealed at the wedding was the perfect ground for heatedly discussed gossip. I never even thought of showing you my tails. Naruto snorted as if she considered it utter nonsense. Tobirama was offended. And he wouldn't mind. Oh no! No! And again no! He wanted to slap himself to get all this out of his head. These are hormones trying to impose these romantic feelings that he does not need. He is just happy with her care, support, sometimes talking to her. So there is no need to deceive himself and follow the chemical reactions of his brain. So carry me back. Anywhere, but not here, Naruto ordered. You forget who you are. He tried to give his voice more seriousness and a little intimidating severity. It turned out not so hot. Yes, and who am I? Still a supervised potential spy who wants to kill your brother or you. Or Madara? And harm Konoha? Naruto asked, correctly understanding where Tobirama was getting at. It is not I who decides who you are, he brushed off the question, still stubbornly dragging her drunken body to the place of her deployment to the house of the head of the Uchiha clan. Let him keep a closer eye on his ward, otherwise she's gone completely wild. But I like the point about Madara. Tobirama laughed drunkenly. I had no doubt, and he felt her smile with his skin. Absurd. He didn't think he would ever be capable of such a thing. Naruto was brazenly taking advantage of the situation and was already using his shoulder as a pillow. And the bitch even turned her head to face his neck, breathing hotly almost into his ear. Come on, moderate your paranoia and look at Madara from a different angle. He's not bad when he's not hatching bloody plans to enslave the world, Naruto said seriously and without his former smile. And does he hatch them? Tobirama tensed up. Relax. I was joking. You don't inspire confidence either. Your ambitious mind can become a threat similar to Madara's love and hate. Just when you come up with new jutsu or reforms, know your limits and remember morals and ethics. Uzumaki settled more comfortably on his shoulder and blissfully closed her eyes. Tobirama's unsteady step lulled her. And what do you think I can do that's so terrible? Tobirama shuddered every now and then from the goosebumps running through him. He could barely concentrate on abstract topics. Still, he still had some strength of spirit. Otherwise, what else? What could he do while he was so drunk? No! Don't think about it, Tobirama. Don't think about it. You're already starting to go crazy. Time will tell. Naruto drawled mysteriously and yawned sweetly, judging by her breathing. And together with them, they found themselves on the threshold of her house. Tobirama, taking off his shoes, entered the room and tried to unload Uzumaki from his back, which also began to hum from such a load. Drunk Naruto felt heavier. I told you that I will not get off you if you bring me here. Uzumaki muttered and tightened her grip. Tobirama breathed heavily. It was as if Naruto was trying to squeeze all the oxygen out of him with such a vice. I'm stronger. Senju grabbed her ankles, crossed on his stomach and tried to unclasp the chokehold. And I'm more stubborn. Naruto resisted. She huffed and grunted, but did not allow him to unclasp her limbs. I'm more cunning. Tobirama tried to take control of his chakra flow. But it did not give in. He was too drunk. And the fact that he dragged Naruto from one end of the village to the other was a real miracle. Don't underestimate the enemy. The eternal discrimination based on gender does not lead to anything good. Naruto said moralizingly and leaned on Tobirama so hard that he staggered. More interesting rumors will spread about you if you don't get off me now. Tobirama squeezed out, breathing heavily, jumping in one place to shake off the stubborn Naruto. But he sensed that they would both lose to banal gravity. Not only about me. Naruto noted, writhing on his back, preventing him from keeping his balance. Both of their heads were spinning. And they fell. Tobirama cursed through tightly clenched teeth. Naruto hissed in pain. They fell on their sides right on her futon, which did little to soften the blow. According to tradition, after a night in a girl's house, a man must marry her. Tobirama lay on his side, feeling that he was unable to get up. The wild partying, the silent drinking session with Naruto and this incomprehensible fuss had drained all his strength. It's already morning. Uzumaki retorted, changing her body position. Now she was hugging his hips instead of Tobirama's torso, pressing her whole body into his back. You understand what I mean. Tobirama did not give in. He needed to get out of the clutches of her arms and legs, otherwise, he felt somehow frighteningly comfortable and convenient. And the warmth of her body had a calming effect. He didn't even want to resist anymore. I'm naive, I didn't understand what you were talking about. Her voice became quieter with each word. As soon as her body was in a lying position, her eyes began to close, and sleep rolled in even more actively. Not you, he said quietly. No, she has moments, but sometimes she says such smart things that Tobirama can only be surprised. And you are not the type to compromise my honor. And anyway, you are not interested in anything except papers and jutsu, so I am calm for myself, Naruto admitted sleepily. I would be offended that you hurt my dignity, but you are right, I am interested in science, research, maybe a little politics, he said just as sleepily, his heavy eyelids closed against his will. The drunken stupor fettered his entire body so that it felt unbearable, and the problem in Naruto's face seemed cozy and pleasant. But not all is lost. Because it seems I am interested in you too, he blurted out drunk, but Naruto did not hear him, having fallen asleep. Tobirama distantly understood that he had blurted out too much and generally said his real nightmare out loud, thereby recognizing it as real. But he would think about what to do with it later. And now he will finally give in to weakness and fall asleep where he fell. Chapter 29. They woke up in the evening. Like most of the villagers. Perhaps they would have slept soundly, waking up safely only the next morning, having slept through all the terrible consequences of a severe hangover. True, the hangover was the least of their troubles. After all, fate had its own plans. Aha! Mother was right, Kagami said triumphantly. No, he didn't say it. He shouted it. He stood at the threshold of her home, holding a tray of food in his hands, finding Naruto and Tobirama together. He was there out of the kindness of his heart. On this day, many adults were lying at home with headaches, including his mother. So he decided to help her with her responsibilities. It was a good decision. Kagami didn't understand much about adult relationships, but he knew for sure. If Naruto was Madara's wife, then she shouldn't be alone with another man, especially in bed. It was unacceptable and insulting. And very, very unfair to his uncle. Especially if that someone is a representative of the Senju clan. Get out, Uzumaki croaked, covering her ears with her hands. Real bells were ringing in her head. I'll tell Uncle Madara everything, the boy said without lowering his intonation, noticing how adults behave from loud sounds. And he secretly started making more noise than before. He put the tray with food on the floor so loudly that all the bowls jumped up, clinked unpleasantly, spilling the contents, and he also accompanied this whole action with stomping. Tobirama covered his head with a thin blanket, unsuccessfully hiding from the loud sounds made by the little Uchiha. Forward, and vaguely waving her hand towards the exit, Naruto turned on her other side and hurried to hide from the outside world under the blanket, where the younger Senju was already hiding. There was not enough space under the blanket for two, so she had to contrive to get in there. She threw her weak and barely moving limbs onto Tobirama, burying her nose in his kimono. Senju, to make it more comfortable for him, stirred under the Uzumaki's weight that had fallen on him again, slipped his hand under her head, pressed her to himself, burying his face in her tousled hair. What impudence! Kagami shook his head sadly like an adult, outraged by the behavior of the kids who were violating all the rules of decency, and clicked his tongue disapprovingly, flashed his eyes angrily, and left. He didn't even leave, he flew out in the direction of the head of the mansion, hurrying to deliver the news before Naruto and Tobirama woke up and sat down in different corners of the room to hide the crime. This boy is crying for. Naruto tried to cling to the elusive sleep and the feeling of serene comfort, but Kagami, damn the Uchiha, destroyed her idol. A buzzing head, a desert in her mouth, aches in her body and a sickening heaviness in her stomach burst to the fore, clearly hinting at the consequences of a night of drinking. Or a rod! Tobirama groaned into the top of her head, coming to his senses. The events preceding his awakening were a big blur. And the fact that Naruto was by his side did not seem abnormal or unthinkable. In the picture of his hungover world, everything looked quite reasonable and correct. Especially the fact that one of his hands rested on her naked thigh, thrown over his legs, and with the other he pressed Naruto closer to himself, who was already almost lying on him. Rods are so last century, the voice still creaked like old rusty hinges that hadn't been oiled. I need water, Uzumaki fidgeted next to Tobirama, trying to get out of the circle of his arms. And no, she didn't mind that Tobirama was lying here next to her, and even hugging her, pressing her to himself. It was just more comfortable that way. And under the thin blanket, designed for her alone, there was only so much room for both of them. So, I have to see this first. With this cry, the world around them began to come to life. Locusts began to chirp in the grass, green leaves rustled on the trees and bushes. Move aside! The voice belonged to a woman. A very noisy and loud one. Naruto and Tobirama simultaneously winced because of the increasing pain in their heads. Maybe we should leave them alone? The second female voice was quieter, and therefore soft, and seemed like a blessing from heaven and the height of adequacy. They definitely needed to be left alone with the insidious hangover, because any sharp noise, both bells and drums in the head. And here they are, stomping like wild biju. There you go! Naruto whispered and grabbed her head. She wanted to hit the one who was stomping and screaming like that with a raisin gun. Her skull was ready to split in two. Oh gods! Hashirama exclaimed in surprise, jumping over the threshold, bursting into Naruto's house first. The gods heard my prayers, Toka noted, leaning out from behind Hashirama's shoulder, which blocked her entire view. Her lips spread into a victorious smile. Can you keep it down? Naruto looked with hatred at Tobirama's emotionally unstable relatives, who were staring at them with wide eyes as if they were some kind of miracle. Tobirama, perhaps, would have been ashamed of them, because his brother and cousin, forgetting about any ethics, broke into someone else's house. But now his head hurt too much, so much that he could not grasp the essence of what was happening. What impudence, to sleep with Tobirama in front of Uncle Madara's nose! Grumbled Kagami, standing next to the aforementioned, clearly wielding facts from the arsenal of rumors that Naruto had managed to accumulate. Both representatives of the clan did not cross the threshold of the house, remaining in the doorway. I sleep with whoever I want, and it's none of your business, lousy boy, Naruto snapped, searching her gaze over the crowd that had formed on her threshold in search of the little fiend of hell. But the whole view was blocked by a very confused Hashirama for some reason. It's dishonest and unfair, the boy insisted no less aggressively. If only your sense of justice would be channeled differently. Tobirama, who had barely opened his eyes, cut into the circus. His still drunk brain immediately latched onto the wording of Naruto's words. The thought process reluctantly began to work. I was right, Toka beamed. In what way? Hashirama didn't understand, looking at Tobirama and Naruto with disbelief. But he had hoped for something else. Something completely different. After all. In this way, Toka waved her hand at the picture that appeared before them, where her cousin and a barely familiar girl were lying on the same futon, under the same blanket. You're not right at all, Tobirama growled angrily. The hangover was the lesser of two evils, as was Kagami, of what had befallen him in the next half hour. His family, that was the purest evil. Slowly the situation became clear to him. He would have backed away from Naruto, moving away from her to another corner of the room, but that would not save him. Uncle Madara, that snake must be punished. Kagami did not understand anything of what was happening, but he was absolutely certain that the honor of their leader was inevitably disgraced, and that girl was to blame for this. Well, that's what Mom says. Madara and Mito wisely stood aside, not interfering in what was happening. Princess Uzumaki was a bastion of prudence, and stood outside, not getting into anything that was not wanted. Hashirama. Naruto assumed a semi-sitting position. Her head was spinning. I demand the position of mission distribution. He managed to brush the curls that had fallen out of his high hairstyle away from his face, but it took a while. Tobirama intervened, sitting on the futon. His coordination was much better. Well, Naruto just hit him a couple of times with her sharp and bony elbow. Eh? Hashirama was confused. They found them in the same bed, and she, however, the question made him think. Do we have such a position? He turned his slightly hunted gaze to Tobirama. Lately, the elder Senju was more concerned with the affairs of the clan and the hospital under construction, rather than with pressing problems. We will. Naruto and I almost came up with a systematization of mission ranking, clearing his throat, Tobirama said with all seriousness and as officially as possible. Is this how you come up with it? Toka's voice was filled with doubt, but her lips were stretched into a sly smile. And then you also came up with a ranking of missions? She drawled, slyly narrowing her eyes. Hashirama understood that he had missed something important. Madara closed his eyes tiredly. He was dragged into a heart-to-heart showdown against his will. This blonde woman not only shook the air around herself, but also around those around her. Almost. Naruto did not catch the subtext. Hashirama's mouth dropped open in surprise. And that's not the point now. Naruto waved it off. Tobirama, however, was coming to his senses and caught the subtext. And Naruto's answer, which had provoked a far from correct idea of his work activities among his relatives, tiredly covered his face and sighed heavily. "Uncle Madara!" Kagami whined, thirsting for justice. The said uncle crossed his arms over his chest, looked sternly at his nephew, and then turned his gaze to the couple caught off guard. The little Uchiha wanted to shrink, or even become invisible from such a look, not to mention shut his mouth. Naruto clearly did not understand what a provocative position she was in, while the sobering Tobirama understood the whole point of the situation. The gesture with which the albino covered his face was filled with despair and hopelessness. Uchiha was the only one who understood that nothing out of the ordinary had happened here. Naruto was dressed, albeit disheveled, and Tobirama's kimono was buttoned up tightly. Most likely, both of them had drunkenly fallen asleep here, next to each other. If there were any prerequisites, they were not destined to happen. This couple had drunk too much. How they had gotten here was a mystery shrouded in darkness. But watching Tobirama's despair was a joy, and he was not going to destroy the illusion of what was happening. "Tobirama!" Senju called out to the younger man in a menacing tone. "Madara." Kagami raised his lowered head again and beamed, anticipating the reprisal against the clan head's malicious enemy. It had begun. "We found you two here. There are many witnesses," he drilled them with a gaze full of condemnation. "We are a very conservative clan, and since Naruto is under my care," Uchiha emphasized each word, attracting everyone's attention. "She is Uzumaki," interrupted Madara's speech Mito, stepping onto the threshold. And she cast such a firm and warlike look at Uchiha, which no one had ever looked at him with, except for Hashirama and Tobirama. "Well, and Naruto too. She is under my care, which means I am in charge of her fate, and not your clan." Hashirama's wife was cut short. "Madara," for which he received a concentration of deadly ki from Mito. Uchiha, glancing to the side of the scarlet-haired Uzumaki, smiled approvingly. But Hashirama perceived such a smile as hostile and bristled. "I belong to myself, and I control my own destiny," Naruto objected, not liking the abrupt change of topic. The senju sitting next to him tensed up. "What can I say?" Everyone around tensed up and looked as if they were ready to engage in battle. With Madara. All at once. "No," Madara said, as if cutting him off. "Where you came from, it may have been so, but not here," the Uchiha stubbornly insisted, enjoying how nervous all the senju who were here were. The Uzumaki exuded indignation and defiance. And the one with the blonde hair, incomprehension. "I am ready to bear responsibility," Tobirama said doomly, agreeing with what had not yet been voiced. And he looked as if they were about to bury him in the hole he had fallen into due to tradition. And there would definitely be no way out. "What are you talking about?" Naruto turned sharply to Tobirama. So sharply that something in her neck crunched. Her face exuded all shades of incomprehension. But Tobirama's face was full of guilt and despair. And this began to scare Naruto quite a bit. "Oh!" Toka drawled understandingly, and the tension on her face gave way to relief. "This is even better, in her opinion." "No! No!" Hashirama objected after him, shifting his unreadable gaze from the blackened Tobirama to the serious Madara. "You wouldn't dare!" The elder stood up for the younger, his gaze flashing menacingly. The tension had reached its peak. Senju was ready to join the fight, fighting for his brother's independence and fate until the last drop of blood. "I don't understand." Naruto held her splitting head with both hands. Her thought process was uncontrollable. Her headache threatened to squeeze her brains out of her skull. She was confused about what was happening. What responsibility? What was going on here? "Stupid!" She heard a sneer in her head. A bright flash of chakra momentarily eclipsed everything around her, and brought reverent relief. The headache was fading. Tobirama next to her twitched strangely, and cast a frowning glance in her direction. "Many people in the quarter already look at her with condemnation. Rumors can tarnish her life, not just her honor." Madara placed his hand on top of the katana handle in warning. His brows were furrowed, and his eyes glittered dangerously. Naruto could barely keep up with the events taking place. Turning to Uchiha, she thought distantly that Madara was paranoid, since he was carrying a katana in his own home, on his personal territory. The only thing she understood was that things were taking a serious and dangerous turn. Hashirama and Madara were ready to claw at each other. Hashirama, he's right. Toka carefully placed her palm on the tense shoulder of the clan leader, sensing that things were getting hot. Unlike Hashirama, Toka was able to see much more, and assumed that such a step would be for the good of Tobirama. Otherwise, knowing her relative, he would hesitate to take the first step for a long time. Because his head is much bigger than his heart. She is free to decide her own fate, Mito said firmly, stepping forward. Right between Madara and her lover. She went to the Uchiha clan for her husband, and immediately got into a commotion. All this threatened to flow into a scandal on the scale of the Valley of the End. Tobirama was indifferent and sat with his head down in sorrow. Toka was unexpectedly on the side of Madara, who stood up for traditional values. Mito was on the side of her supposed relative, and Hashirama defended his brother's freedom of choice. Naruto still couldn't figure out what had just caused all this. SS clearly, with emphasis and such a familiar growl, and at the same time with a universal scale doom. The whole world became distant and worthless against the background of this roar. No, I'm not stupid. Uzumaki was offended at the top of her voice, grabbing her hair. A voice from the depths of the subconscious irritated her already frayed patience. All eyes immediately crossed on her. These are the times of the founders, baby. Traditions are above all here. Remember what Tobirama told you yesterday. Someone from inside said patiently, but not without a venomous sarcasm. What? Naruto did not understand the reason for such close attention. She felt that all eyes were on her. And then she understood. She understood everything. And she squealed. Joyfully. Her happiness was much higher and greater than the indignation and outrage that the Uchiha was trying to control her life here. Everyone was taken aback. Madara's face changed. Tobirama turned his head in her direction in bewilderment, shocked by her reaction. Toka tried to suppress a smile. Hashirama blinked in amazement. Mito smiled somehow understandingly. Uzumaki stood up and straightened up, straightening her shoulders proudly. Tobirama, breathe out, everything will be fine, Naruto assured him, placing her hand in an encouraging gesture on the drooping shoulder of the younger Senju. My life, my rules. And you, if you don't agree. Naruto barely hobbled to Madara, going around the frozen Senju. I'll make you agree. She wanted to grab the Uchiha by the collar of his home yukata and shake him, but she pulled herself back, measuring him with a murderous look. Now she has significant support, and she feels much more confident and stronger than before. True, she shouldn't show off to those who stand behind her support, otherwise she will definitely bring trouble on her head, but now she has become much calmer. And everyone took her happy screams for a war cry, watching Naruto advance on Madara. Relax, Uzumaki. The Uchiha grinned. And then his shoulders shook. Madara laughed quietly. You should have seen your faces. Tobirama looked so doomed and broken. Madara's laughter did not last long. He quickly pulled on a mask of melancholic indifference. But Uncle Madara, Kagami, who was anticipating the punishment of the notorious Senju, was upset. Kagami, Naruto is living here temporarily, she is nobody to me. And she does whatever she wants, and the rumors. His eyes flashed unkindly. Tell your mother to curb her rich imagination, otherwise. I want her to curb everything. Kagami's face changed, turning pale in an instant. Madara's authority worked instantly. The small representative of the clan immediately hurried to run away, sensing that things had turned against him. Don't thank me. Madara winked. Naruto turned around and walked away. So, and I believed you. Toka sighed in disappointment. But such a good excuse wasted. She muttered under her breath, leaving the room. Tobirama sat on the futon, not understanding how to feel about the current situation. It seemed like he was disappointed, but it seemed like he felt relieved. Move me. Naruto turned around and looked very expressively at Hashirama. Okay, I'll think of something. The future first said somewhat slowly, and left the house, taking his wife by the arm. This was beyond his strength. Madara is a joker. Tobirama, let's go. Is he really sober?